Hello friends, interesting news is coming from sunny Poland related to the labor market and layoffs. Why is the familiar world of Polish office prosperity and easy franchise income rapidly collapsing before our eyes? From tax rates on small Żabka owners to the triumphant march of neural networks through the offices of Krakow. Let's figure out how Poland's economic miracle collided with harsh reality and why a skilled carpenter now earns more than an office manager. We'll discuss everything now. Please leave a like to support the working class and aerodynamics. Friends, thank you so much to everyone who doesn't hold back. These simple actions take just 2 seconds. Yes, click the bell, check your notifications. Now let's get down to business. Thank you for your support. So, part 1. There will be timestamps for your convenience. Small business with a big catch. How did Żabka eat its bosses? If you've ever been to Poland, you've probably noticed a green logo of a chain store on almost every corner. Żabka. The concept turned out to be perfect. You, a young, handsome, ambitious entrepreneur, take a ready-made franchise, run like a hamster on a wheel, sell people hot dogs, coffee, alcohol, and life is good. But here's the catch. When it's time to pay the bills, it turns out that all that entrepreneurial independence is nothing more than an illusion. Today, storm clouds have gathered over the Żabka franchise. The tax authorities have come for the VAT bills, VAT on turnover, and the amounts of arrears are calculated in hundreds of thousands of zlotys. And here, my friends, is where things get really interesting. Here are a couple of examples from an article on this topic. Entrepreneur Emilia is forced to sell her own apartment just to pay off her creditors. And her colleague Małgorzata, actually, not just to creditors, but to the government as well, since taxes go to them, right? And her colleague Małgorzata desperately points to the parent company. Żabka should pay, not the ordinary managers. Watch closely, friends. A large corporate structure has built a brilliant scheme. All the best returns and profits from the giant network flow upward, but absolutely all the financial and legal risks are shifted onto the shoulders of the small franchisees. The small business owner believed he was a partner, but was actually just a buffer between the corporation and tax authorities. And when the tax authorities applied their pressure, the buffer started to crack at the seams, triggering a wave of bankruptcies. To be fair, many new Żabka stores are opening too, but that's just the cycle. In Wrocław, a Żabka opened in just 8 square meters, and in Warsaw, a 2-story Żabka opened in place of the H&M store. Yes, it's definitely interesting there. Write in the comments if you've come across this franchise. Maybe your friends or acquaintances work there. What's it like there? But as far as I know, it's very hard work, a very tough business. Next, part 2, Courier drama, state ping pong and 5,000 people fired, right? What could be better than working for a major online service, right? Let's take a look at food delivery, pisne.pl. In July of 26, the State Labor Inspectorate entered the company with heads held high, led by Deputy Chief Inspector Ms. Ursula Langer. Interesting name she has. Well, okay, Ursula is a common name in Poland, but Langer isn't exactly a typical Polish name. The officials, spurred on by calls from the Ministry of Family and Labor, quickly got to work and started inspecting. They noticed, are you, dear comrades, replacing full employment contracts, umowa o pracę, with so-called junk contracts, that is, umowa o zlecenie and so on? The idea of the officials is basically to force businesses to give people guarantees, minimum wage, paid vacations, and so on. And now let's take a look at the business's counter-move in this fascinating game. As soon as the company pisne.pl heard about the upcoming reforms and strict inspections, they immediately announced the layoff of 5,000 couriers, that is, people, and they just threw them out into the cold. The dismissed employees were elegantly offered to move to third-party fleet operators, that is, to third-party intermediaries. What does this mean in practice? It means that instead of a direct contract and at least some social protection, the courier ends up in a gray area of subcontracting, where their earnings depend entirely on the number of kilometers they ride on their bike, how many pizzas they deliver, and the working conditions have become even worse than before. The government is trying to tighten the screws, forcibly introduce protection standards, while businesses simply look for workarounds. They throw people off the balance sheet, moving into flexible gray area arrangements. And while the labor inspection takes months to study the documents, 5,000 people have already been left out in the cold without stability. Well, that's how it is, friends. As a courier, of course, while you're young and pedaling, you can make decent money, especially if you don't have a family. Yes, it's easier. Having a family means you're always working, constantly pedaling. Yeah, but of course, all of this is only temporary. Let us know if you know any couriers and how they earn money, unless it's confidential. And now we move on to part 3, the great exodus from Krakow, the end of the era of cheap offices. Yes, we're getting to the main point. You might think, by the way, that the problems of couriers or small shopkeepers are just some local stories. But no, my friends, the process has gone much deeper. A fundamental shift has begun in Poland, which has affected the very heart of Poland's economic growth over the past 20 years, that is, the white-collar workers. A wave of mass layoffs is sweeping across the country. The epicenter of this process has become the city of Krakow, recognized as the capital of international service hubs and IT centers. For example, career consultant Katarzyna Matewicz states directly, "This is the end of the labor market as we have known it for the past 20 years. How did this happen, you may ask? In the 2000s and the 2010s, transnational giants were opening offices in Poland en masse, and the formula for success was quite simple and effective. Educated, motivated young people with knowledge of foreign languages were ready to work for much less money than their colleagues and peers in London or Frankfurt. Well, in fact, Poland became the perfect back office of Europe. But as the song goes, nothing lasts forever under the moon. First of all, the cost of labor has increased quite significantly. The minimum wage has jumped and keeps rising. Expenses for rent, for energy, everything has skyrocketed. And competitors from Asia, for example, sunny India, are offering their services much cheaper. Secondly, the Polish economy is trying to instantly implement strict EU labor standards without having the 50 years of resilience that the West has accumulated. And thirdly, His Majesty Artificial Intelligence has entered the stage. So this brings us smoothly to the fourth part of our video, train your neural network replacement and the broken ladder. There's also an interesting specific story about Maciej from Krakow. Or is it Maciej? I think it's Maciej. Maciej. The man spent almost 20 years of his life working in the BPO sector. He went from being an unpaid and powerless intern to becoming the head of the finance department with 50 people. He lived well, lived large, paid off his mortgage, and went to resorts. And 2 years ago, some efficient managers came to him and said, "Maciej, buddy, you know what we should do for the good of the company? Digitize all the processes in your department. Record every little detail, every mistake." So Maciej and his team carefully digitized everything. They manually trained the algorithm themselves, which, guess what? That's right, the one that replaced them, and then they started using the salami slicing tactic. They kept slicing pieces off the department, increasing the workload on those who remained, under the pretext of productivity growth, thanks to artificial intelligence. And by the start of 2026, the whole department was simply disbanded. Maciej was lucky, he found a job thanks to his connections, but with a noticeable decrease in income, as often happens. For example, 26-year-old Mikal spent 18 months entering data into Excel. After being fired, he sent 80 resumes with no interviews. This is reported by the Polish press, not something I'm making up. Well, as I already said, 0 interviews and complete hopelessness. He had to work as a delivery cyclist for a while and move back with his parents. First, you won't need to pay for housing, and second, you can help your father in the carpentry workshop. From their perspective, that's the main tragedy. Previously, upward mobility operated smoothly. A graduate of a liberal arts university would get access to corporate resources in a junior position, spend a couple of years shuffling papers and making spreadsheets, and then grow into a well-off senior specialist. Today, this lower rung of the career ladder has simply been cut off. Why would a company hire a newcomer if a language model and algorithm can do the initial analysis faster, more accurately, and not just cheaper, but completely free? In fact, according to research, 71% of office workers in Poland are employed in fields vulnerable to artificial intelligence, and 59% of young people are panicking about their future. Frankly, they have good reason to be afraid. Here's what the traditional career ladder looked like. Junior data entry, then mid-level specialist, then senior manager. Today, artificial intelligence replaces juniors, making entry into the profession almost impossible. Well, that's how it is, friends. Next, we have part 5, the end of the corporate collective farm and the rebirth of the machine shop. Experts compare large corporations to modern PGRs for a reason. PGR is a Polish equivalent of a collective or state farm. That is, people spent years doing narrow, highly specialized functions, firmly believing in the myth that loyalty to the company guarantees a comfortable life until retirement. After being cast out, they realized no one needed their mouse-clicking skills anymore. And for one vacancy of an ordinary office retiree employee, there are 840 resumes. Even the competition becomes a Hunger Games scenario. There is official statistics from the regional employment office, and they try to smooth things over. They say, well, yes, a couple of thousand people were laid off, but new centers are opening. Well, for example, something like Rolls-Royce or Mercedes. But economists warn the statistics are lying because companies have learned to lay people off in installments. They simply don't renew temporary contracts or push people into B2B arrangements. That way, they don't have to pay severance. What employer would want to fire a guy and then pay him 3 months' salary while he sits at home doing nothing? So what are we left with in the end? The era of easy entry into the middle class through office routine is over. The market is crushing those illusions. And it turns out that a general higher education no longer guarantees protection from poverty. Meanwhile, an independent carpenter can set his own prices today. For example, 18,000 zlotys for a single wardrobe. He turns down small orders and earns more than a mid-level executive. That's what the article says, but I honestly don't know. As for 18,000 zloty wardrobes, well, I'm sure they exist, but my friend Uncle Vova is doing renovations right now and buying a wardrobe, and they quoted him 7,000 zlotys for a small wardrobe. Well, that's how it is. The Polish labor market is facing a painful but inevitable restructuring. Society will have to give up its snobbery towards blue-collar professions. Auto mechanics, electricians, plumbers, and carpenters are becoming the new elite, while fans of fancy presentations will have to retrain to acquire real, hard-to-replace skills. Well, friends, let me know in the comments, are you a blue-collar or a white-collar worker? If you're a white-collar worker, are you ready to trade your laptop for a set of wrenches, or do you hope that neural networks won't notice you? Write in the comments. It's really interesting to discuss all this, because as a representative of the working class, all of this really hits close to home for me. Thank you very much for your attention. Leave likes, write comments, take care of yourselves. To all the working class, truck drivers, computer guys, greetings to everyone. That's all for now. See you next time. Oh, and add, Dennis from the city, watch till the end from the city of Apolli. Mr. Taras Sergiuk, hello? So, greetings to everyone, take care of yourselves, see you next time.